Well, the AUKUS submarine deal is being billed as one of the largest announcements made by an Australian Prime Minister in decades and the most significant defence investment since the Second World War. With a 30-year lifespan, it is designed to endure long beyond the governments of today. And Kieran Gilbert, our chief anchor, is in San Diego to bring us all the latest developments. Kieran, the PM has just met with his British counterpart, Rishi Sunak.
Yes, he has, Andrew. They're just at a restaurant a couple of blocks from where I'm standing here in San Diego called Lionfish. They've greeted each other and had a private discussion as well over supper, but the cameras were allowed in briefly to capture a couple of remarks. Have a listen.
It's an important day for UK-Australia relations with the announcement that we're making, and I'm delighted to see you again.
Well, tomorrow will be a very big day. And AUKUS has been a lot of hard work, but it is in the three countries' interests. The sum of the three is more than 1 + 1 + 1 in this case, and I think the cooperation that we've had is really exciting. We see that this is an investment in our capability, but at the same time, of course, we're investing in our relationships in the region as well. And I've been talking with other leaders in the region as well, explaining our position, and it's been well received and understood why we're doing this. It builds on our long-term relationship.
Yeah, no, well, we're very excited about it. It's about our commitment to the Pacific region, which, even though it's geographically a long way from where we are, it's important in a way to demonstrate our commitment to the values that we both hold dear as countries, and this is a great expression of them. But also, good year for UK-Australia more generally. We've got the free trade agreement, which is coming, which is going to go pass through and be enforced, and also hopefully I'll get the English Lionesses to be raising the World Cup later this summer. We'll see how that goes. But we're feeling good about it. I actually just met some of them the other day, actually. So that should be exciting for us. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you back for the coronation.
I think it's going to be great. I'll be back there in May.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Well, Kieran, it's his third British Prime Minister in less than 12 months in office, isn't it? But they've all been consistent on the AUKUS agreement. And interesting timing that he just mentioned there, Anthony Albanese, the coronation in May. It's literally a couple of days before the federal budget. He has to travel to the UK for that.
He's got a lot of other travel coming up this year, as you well know. Andrew, you got the summit season later, you got the coronation. Narendra Modi invited him back at the end of the year as well, after the G20. So there's the Cricket World Cup, and he invited him to attend that. So they are becoming good mates. But yes, lots on the agenda. This one, the big one over the next couple of days, 48 hours, Andrew, as I reported earlier in the program on Afternoon Agenda, and broke this news that the government's price tag won't be reported in dollar terms across the life of the nuclear submarine program. So there won't be a dollar figure attached to it. You and others have been reporting that it's hundreds of billions of dollars. That's 100% correct. That's right. It will be in the hundreds of billions. But the government will report it as a percentage of GDP in the longer term. And my advice is that it will be, my information is that it will be over 0.1% of GDP every year across the lifetime of the nuclear submarine program. There will be specific dollar figures put on the forward estimates, the first 4 years of the program, or the forthcoming forward estimates. The dollar figure given on that. There will be a cost range given across the 10-year period. So for 10 years, there will be a range given, and then over the full lifetime, the 30 years of the nuclear submarine program, it will be given as a percentage of GDP over 0.1% of GDP every year of the lifetime of this very expensive project, Andrew.
And I guess that's not surprising, Kieran, because in budgets we only ever hear about the forward estimates 4 years and sometimes 10-year figures, sometimes to make a spend look bigger. In this case, you don't have to make it much bigger. It's huge. But you'd expect the forward estimates would be somewhat spared. I mean, sure, there'll be the workforce costs, but it doesn't sound like we're getting the actual subs until 2030 or so anyway, does it?
Yeah, exactly right. So the timeline that we've got is 2027, we'll have US Virginia-class submarines visiting on a rotation basis our ports. It won't be a base. It'll be more like the marine rotations you see in the Northern Territory. That's from 2027. From 2030, we should start to see the acquisition of some Virginia-class submarines for the Australian Navy, and then into the mid to late 2030s is when we see that full production cost, Andrew, of the Australian-made on a base, a British design with the US combat system on board. So, yes, those full costs out beyond the 2030s, but it is going to build, and it is the most expensive military acquisition we've seen in Australia from any Australian government. But it's also, as the Deputy Prime Minister has said, the biggest leap in military capability that we have seen for the Australian military at any point in its life.
So how does it roll out from here, Kieran? How many hours are we away from the announcement? When's the bilat with Biden, etc.?
Well, it's not far. We're now about 9 p.m. local time, just after 9 p.m. local time in the morning. We will get a briefing. Those travelling media are going to be briefed on the detail, almost like a budget lock-up, but this will be an AUKUS lock-up. We then go to the facility here at San Diego, a massive military city, this one, Andrew. It's the biggest part of the economy. There's no doubt about it. Within San Diego, the biggest employer. There will be, as I say, that briefing into a trilateral meeting between Biden, Sunak and Albanese in the morning, followed by the announcement. That's going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern Australian Daylight Saving Time, so that's 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Time, and then there'll be a bilateral meeting between Biden and Albanese. So a busy morning in the early hours of Sydney during our breakfast news period with Pete Stefanovic on air. We'll be reporting in with all the details throughout that period.
And it's quite extraordinary how this all started, isn't it? This meeting in Cornwall, the G7 Plus. Boris Johnson had cooked it up with Scott Morrison. Officials had spoken. They got Biden on board. Then they kept it secret for months. And it's two British Prime Ministers down the track. And finally, it's landed in a different Australian Prime Minister. Again, I guess this shows, with all the change of personnel, the political risk, as you said earlier, to a change of government in the US and the UK. And does this mean this thing doesn't come off ultimately?
Yeah, that's the risk, isn't it? Or one of the many risks. You've got so many things, say, on the workforce question. You've got all those submariners we've got to bring up to speed to be able to staff a Virginia-class boat, for example, in the first instance, with 135 submariners on those sorts of submarines. On the Collins class, it's only up to 60. Then you've got the industrial risk. Can we build these things into the 2030s? Will we have the industrial base sufficient enough to do it? And will they do it on time and on budget? Defence hasn't had the greatest track record on that, although there will be a separate inter-department agency that will run this out. So they're hoping that they'll be able to deliver on that. So you've got the workforce risk, the industrial risk, and then there's the political risk across 3 countries, multiple administrations, from the possibilities in the UK and Australia, let alone here in the United States. You don't have to look that far to see a nationalist Prime Minister saying America first and then really putting the alliances to one side. If we were to see a Trump 2.0, Trump himself potentially returning, who knows where AUKUS goes in that context.
Well, thanks for your time tonight there in San Diego, Kieran. We'll speak to you next hour.